Recycling has enormous benefit for the planet and for local communities, but there's a downside for people who do the collecting and processing. There's a new report about resulting workplace hazards put out by the Massachusetts Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health, or MassCOSH. We'd like to welcome as our guest from the group, the Labor Environment Coordinator, Tolle Graham. Thank you very much for being with us, Tolle.
Thank you for inviting us.
First of all, talk about the job here and what kind of hazards you're worried about.
Well, this report focuses on the people that are actually sorting the stuff that we put in our blue bins. And they're on a line and they're picking and bending over in awkward postures and grabbing at all kinds of materials, some of which shouldn't be in there to begin with. So what our report found is that people are finding discarded needles, rotting food that hasn't been, cleaned out from containers, and then that actually attracts pests that sometimes get caught in the bins and die. So we've got carcasses, and then there's glass. We recycle glass, and often the glass gets tumbled around, and there's shards and fumes, and sometimes even things get in there that you wouldn't even anticipate. Like there was an incident in Vermont where pepper spray got put into the recycling and it let go during the sorting time, and they sent 17 workers to the hospital because of that.
Well, needles is scary because you're thinking, could it be HIV or could it be hepatitis? So I guess there may be even some cases of people who've been jabbed.
Yes, so we did get, some evidence of, first of all, one of the things that was very surprising to us when we looked at the various data that we could get from OSHA and the Bureau of Labor Standards was that recycling workers are twice as likely to get injured on the job as just the average worker. So yes, they can get jabbed and with a needle, and we don't necessarily know, who is using the needle or for what purposes. And, it sort of, what our report says is that municipalities and governments, have an obligation but also a real opportunity to benefit from the climate action impacts of doing good recycling, but they need to have responsible contractors. And often the city creates a contract, they bid out for these services. And so what we're saying, and we've really focused this around here in Boston with the new mayor, is when you create these contracts, you should include that they have to have strong health and safety standards, and they have to have programs and training. And we've also found that, our local company, Casella, that our city contracts with, uses a lot of temp labor. And this is not unusual in this sector. It seems that other cities across the country are using them too. But the cities that have taken more of a proactive look at the workplace side of it as well as the environmental side, some of them actually are stepping up to the plate and requiring all of these things that I talked about. Reducing the number of temps, the training, and providing a living wage.
You mentioned the injury rate, but predominantly what kinds of injuries are you talking about?
Sometimes it's a needle stab, sometimes it's a cut. There have been 17 fatalities in this sector across the country in the last couple of years. We're dealing with, once you get inside the gates of these recycling sort centers, you have large machinery moving around huge bales of materials. So there have been people that have been crushed by them, falling in and caught in machinery. Just going back to why it's so important to have community education and engagement around recycling is a lot of people put plastic bags in their bins. They may think they're recycling plastic, and that plastic was not designed to go into these mechanized machines with the conveyor belts and sorting, and they get caught. And sometimes workers are pushed to work faster than they should and are intimidated and afraid to speak up and say, we need to turn the machine off. So they may reach in and lose a finger.
Part of this is, as you mentioned, what the people, the sources put into these
right.
containers. But
right.
but what can a company do differently to leave the workers less exposed?
Well, I think that it has to be, the reason why this report focused on what steps municipalities could take is that it has to be a partnership between the municipality and the contracted MRF, because we have to have really good education and engagement at the neighborhood level, so these things that shouldn't get into the waste stream don't get into those blue bins. And then we have to make sure that these injury prevention programs are there. I think there has been some attention to the design of these recycling sort centers, but they have a long way to go to keep as evidenced by the statistics that we found.
Is there anything else that can be done to lower the hazards? I mean, whether it's inspections or some ways of changing the fear factor in reporting, maybe?
Right. Well, one of the reasons why we think there is the fear factor is because they often, and in Boston we know they have two sets of employees. They have some permanent employees, and then they have some coming from temp agencies. And the temp, it's unclear how well the temp agency workers are being trained and how long they stay. So we may have, a problem around communication and understanding of what are the safe ways we do work in this facility. But we also, OSHA would say, you need management commitment and labor involvement, and we really believe in that. Sometimes that means a labor management health and safety committee, and in places that don't have unions where they bargain these things, we're saying that minimally the contracts that the cities have with these recycling sort centers should include mechanisms so that workers can speak up and they will take seriously the health and safety regulations that we have.
I have to imagine that the companies look at temporary workers as cheap, unskilled labor, and so why not use them?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the reason why not is because often you're ending up with an employer, another set of employers, another set of bosses, and what we're finding is the communication and who's really responsible often at that work site becomes very confusing for everybody. So if you have, 20 people that are working for one company and then you have 30 that come in from a different temp agency, we often see that there's a breakdown there.
I know you've got some more information on the MassCOSH website, so if people want to look for that, what's the best way?
It's MassCOSH.org, and it should be right on the front page.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
From MassCOSH, Tolle Graham.